Superintendent and Eileen here to talk to us about the strategic planning process for the Lexington Public School, and also the vision for the school and so on. At the same time, we also appreciate the opportunity for them to listen to the input from the community. So we have a full agenda. So the first, Julie is going to talk about, provide some remark, and then after that, there will be representative on each topics that we collected from the community. So, each one will talk about those topics so from 5 to 8 minutes. And then after that, Eileen and Judy will provide some comments. And then at the end, we are open the forum for questions. But, I will control the time, so make sure you don't, hog the air. So welcome, Julie.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. If there's one thing I know about Lexington, it's that people like to talk about issues. And that is funny, isn't it? I'm really happy that you reach out, and I'm really happy to listen and to learn about the topics that are of interest to you. Also, I am grateful for the opportunity to talk to you about our process. And one of the things that's really important to know about the strategic planning process is that it is, we're well into the process. We had a timeline that began early on in the fall. It was publicized, and we've had many, many data gathering events and opportunities to listen. Wanted to point out that Francesca Fromer is here. She's a fabulous teacher at the high school. She's also on the synthesis team, which is part of the strategic planning process that's been quite important. Eileen has been an enthusiastic member of the synthesis team. I always laugh because she's really, really excited about strategic planning, and it takes a certain kind of person to get really excited about strategic planning. So a little bit about the process. The process has been intensive. The process by design is intended so that you can know what's happening in the system, so that we can decide together what's going to happen in the future. It's a little tricky in a place like Lexington because people have different beliefs and different ways that they come at this work. And our job is to hear all perspectives and then try to figure out a path forward. And I think that the distinction I want to make tonight for you is that the effort is to be as transparent as possible. And when I came in as the new superintendent in July, one of the things I heard both from the parent community and from our educators is that new initiatives happen and they just appear, and how the heck did they even get here in the first place, and who's making these decisions, and we want to know more. So part of our effort to help you know more is to have this process so that there's no guesswork. One of the examples that has come up, that I've heard a number of times is PBL, for example, project-based learning. How did it get here? What's the intention? There are differences of opinion about who thinks it's useful, who doesn't think it's useful. It's been interesting to me because the assumptions and beliefs that people hold about perhaps what the leadership believes about education come from maybe what is heard a few years back, and it's just kind of catching up with people. So tonight is a lot about kind of setting the record straight to the extent that we can. Some of you are going to ask me questions and you're going to ask for answers, and if you want them to be definitive, I'm going to disappoint you because they won't be. And part of that is because we are still in the midst of a process. I will tell you what I believe, what I know. I will be as honest and straightforward as possible, but it may be unsatisfying if you don't get a conclusive answer. And the reason you won't get a conclusive answer is because a process means that you respect the process, you hear all inputs and opinions, and then when we're ready, we'll roll out the plan. And that's when you get to say, I like this, I don't like this, and then we'll take it into consideration and go back to the drawing board. So hopefully that's clear. What we're going to do tonight, first of all, is hear what you have to say. Sherry, my mother's name is Sherry, so I should never forget your name, Sherry. That was very bad. But Sherry mentioned, first of all, having me start with the questions. But I think what I'd rather do, if it's okay with all of you, is to listen and hear what some of the concerns are. I know we have speakers who are going to talk about topical issues. I'll respond in between the speakers, and then at the end we can get to some of those questions that you had on the big long list, and I'll answer as many as I can, and I'm happy to do that. Does that sound okay? Good? Good. Okay. Eileen, were you going to?
No, actually,
Make
all
our-
I want to
okay.
do is say that we're all on a first name basis here, which means everybody's been saying Julie, Eileen, so forth. Just in case some of you don't know who I am Eileen J. I'm the chair of the school committee, and I'm also a member of the synthesis team for the strategic planning. So this whole effort to do the strategic planning came from the school committee recognizing some of what Julie, Dr. Hackett, just said of concerns about too many different initiatives going on and the real need for a really comprehensive look at what the direction for Lexington Public Schools should be. So it became something that was very important when we were doing the hiring for Dr. Hackett, so that we could bring all of that together. And she, since she's been here, has been very helpful in making it a very transparent, open process open to the community, getting feedback from educators, staff, teachers, administrators, students will be part of this, and many different segments of the community. There have been general community forums. We've had one in Boston. We've had one with the CPAC, special education. So we're really trying to pull in all of that viewpoint. So that's just to give you set the stage for what this process is all about.
Thank you.
How do we start? I was asked to talk about the first topic, which is the rankings and the college admissions. So I moved to Lexington 3 years ago. Before that, I was in North Andover. My children were going through private schools. So we have been here for 3 years, and so far we have loved the school, both the middle school, Clark, and the high school. So we like it so much that the other day my daughter said, "Why, Mommy, you know, when I grow up, I'm not going to repeat the same mistakes you have made." I was like, what mistake did I make? She was like, "I'm not going to wasting my money sending my children to private schools when they can go to public schools like here." I was like, you know, you're not going to go see public schools like this everywhere. So this really speaks to the tradition of excellence in Lexington. And you know, Julie, you have been here for less than half a year, but it's fair to say that you have won the heart of many of us. So we appreciate you being open and being willing to listen. So in that spirit, I just want to share with all of you that some of the thoughts, conversations that's happening in the community. So we have some parents who are keep track of the rankings of the Lexington Public Schools and also the college admissions results. So for the college admissions, if you tally up the matriculation to the top 25 schools in the last 4 years, from 2017 to the 16, 17, 18, and 19, you can see that from 2018, there is a pretty steep drop from 2017, and once again in 2019. So this is a concerning trend. And then the other thing that people have been sharing with me is that if you look at the Boston Magazine ranking, the Lexington Public School, it used to be ranked like top 3, and then it dropped to number 4, and then last year it was dropped to number 9. Obviously, for any that kind of rankings, you have to take it with a grain of salt. And then my question to you, Julie, and then to Eileen is that as a school district, what kind of metrics do we monitor to see how are we doing performance-wise? And then do you see the same trend? And then I think some of the unease about changes is that people some of them are thinking that this change in the last 2 years could be related to some of the policy changes we had in the school district in the last couple of years. So, you know, that's why we want to make sure that any change that we're going to adopt is going to be for the better, not for the worse. So that's really just my comment, and then, you know, my presentation, and I welcome your comments.
How would you like me to do this? Should we go back up? Okay. So thank you for the comments and thank you for the question. And I think in a community like Lexington, it's not surprising that people have that question on their minds. We come to this community because we place high value on education, and one of the outcomes that many people want for their children is for them to go on to one of those tier 1 colleges and a very competitive opportunity. So I have some of the rankings. Just as an aside, I used to use the US News rankings when I was in my last job for a very different purpose. So I was 10 years in Taunton actually as a superintendent for a very different kind of community. I was also in Brookline, which is more similar to Lexington, but in Taunton we used those rankings because we had many first-generation children who did not have aspirations to even go to college, nor did they have aspirations to go to a competitive college. So for us, we tracked the rankings in the tier 1 so that we could say, you can do this and you should do this, and these are the opportunities we're going to create. So these are not news to me. I'm familiar with the rankings. I see the numbers that have been offered. I just got this today, so I haven't had a chance to look at it and sort of respond more fully and thoughtfully, but I will spend more time with this. To your question about the metrics, part of what the strategic planning timeline said right up front is that we're going to be looking at metrics. Once we get the goals in place, the metrics will follow. So we don't have those set yet. We don't have a data dashboard or a system of looking at it. What we do know, presently we don't. I think at some point we're going to be looking at things that define success beyond just a college ranking. That should weigh into it as well, but I am very interested in that. I'm also interested in those other measures that make children successful. I don't know exactly how we're going to choose to measure it until we work through the process. The other thing I would say is that you can't talk about, and these are not my test scores, so I came in July, as you pointed out, so just FYI, these do not belong to me. Next year they may very well look the same, I don't know, but what I will say about that is that there are many factors that determine who's going where, and I think the offers are kind of important to take a look at. This actual ranking says offer and acceptance, so there are 2 data sets per year that are interesting, but you all know the reality of the situation right now, which is also finances play into this, demographics in terms of where do children go to school and how many offers get given by every competitive school. So to boil it down to one variable and say, Lexington made policy changes, therefore the acceptances or the acceptances are lowered, I don't think is entirely a complete and accurate picture. Sometimes it's the case where in college admissions, obviously, they can't offer everybody in Lexington a spot. They look around the state, they look at different parts of the country and so forth. But we do have the list. We will be keeping an eye on it. We will take a look at our metrics once we get our strategic planning in place. And I guess this will come up probably in other questions, but from the get-go, from my interview from the get-go, part of what I've said to people is I don't have an interest in reducing the academics. I don't have an interest in making this not a high-performing school system. I think that part of the assumption that occurred early on was because of some initiatives that were happening before and because of clear messaging by people who came before me about, we're interested in the more of the social emotional learning aspects. And I guess the answer I would say, somebody asked me very point blank, like, would you do what your predecessor did, and can you speak to that? And I guess the answer I would give is I believe strongly in a very balanced approach. I believe that children are more engaged with rigorous activities often than they are with kind of just boring sorts of wastes of time. If you ask kids, who's your best teacher? Very, very often it's the one who challenged them the most. And I think that that's a really important detail. But I also think that we have children in this community who do need some extra support and do need some different ways of doing this educational business that we're in. And what I hear from kids, and they're very poignant in their remarks and very honest, is that sometimes they struggle. They struggle from the pressures they place upon themselves, the pressures that their peers place upon them, and the pressure that their teachers sometimes or their parents and caregivers place upon them. So I think we just have to be mindful and really listen and create thoughtful approaches that don't reduce the expectations. We're preparing kids to think and run the world one day, and I don't take that lightly. And they're especially going to be children from places like Lexington who have a lot to offer, and we just need to do right by them in that way. So we'll keep tracking the data, and you'll have me back here next year when my scores come out, and we'll have another conversation, but it's important to keep an eye on. I don't think it's the entire story, and I do think that we will broaden our view of what success looks like. That may well be one factor, but it's not the only factor.
That's very fair. You know,